The results from yesterday's primary races in 5 states show just how much of a hold former President Trump still has over the Republican Party. Senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is in Tempe, Arizona with the latest results. Good morning, Ed.
David, good to see you. And notable last night, they're still counting ballots here in Arizona as the sun is yet to come up. But from Missouri to Michigan to here in Arizona, candidates who reject the results of the 2020 elections prevailed. It's going to be really interesting to see how they hold up in general election matchups this fall.
I guess there's no turning back now, is there?
With votes still being counted in Arizona's Republican gubernatorial primary, Karen Taylor Robson, backed by former Vice President Mike Pence, is claiming victory. Robson is neck and neck with opponent Kari Lake. The former TV news anchor, backed by former President Donald Trump, believes the 2020 election was stolen. She's also claiming victory.
We're not going to take our election systems being this messed up.
The winner will face off against Democratic nominee Katie Hobbs. Meanwhile, in Arizona's Senate race, Democrat Mark Kelly is set to face off against Trump-backed venture capitalist Blake Masters, another election denier. And yet another Trump-backed candidate, Mark Fincham, has won the GOP race for Secretary of State. He's an election denier and has been one of the loudest voices promoting the former president's unsubstantiated claims that the election was rigged. If he wins in November, he would oversee Arizona's elections. Then there's the U.S. Senate race in Missouri.
I am honored to be your nominee for the United States Senate.
National Republicans are breathing a sigh of relief that Eric Schmidt defeated Vicky Hartzler and Eric Greitens, the controversial former governor of Missouri, who's being accused of glorifying political violence.
Today, we're going rhino hunting.
I want to make this a better state.
And in Michigan, Tudor Dixon won the GOP nomination for governor. She believes the 2020 election was stolen and will face off against Democratic incumbent Gretchen Whitmer, seeking a second term.
And in another closely watched race in Michigan, Republican Congressman Peter Meijer has lost his primary to Trump-backed candidate John Gibbs. Meijer, who's in his first term, was one of those House Republicans who voted to impeach former President Trump after the January 6 riots. We're also keeping tabs on 2 other House Republicans from Washington State, Dan Newhouse and Jamie Herrera Beutler, who also voted to impeach the president. Washington holds what they call jungle or open primaries with members of both parties. They got to make it into the top 2 to advance in November. David?
Ed, in addition, any unexpected wins or defeats elsewhere?
No, well, I think the one that obviously everyone will be talking about today is the Kansas result and rejection of trying to block abortion rights, because that one, I think, gives an indication of if it can work in a state like Kansas, where the vote was run up in Topeka and Wichita, the urban centers, and was rejected across the rest of the state. But if it can work in a state like that, then how will abortion politics factor into bigger states with bigger urban and suburban populations where a majority of Americans across the country have said they reject what the Supreme Court did? So watch now in the coming days to see if Democratic candidates start talking about it more, especially those running for governor. If the president starts talking about it more on behalf of the whole party, he's signing that executive order later today. And how, if at all, Democrats in these states across the country, or at least those who support sustaining abortion rights, try to work similar ballot initiatives onto the ballot either this year or in 2 years when there's a presidential election that draws out even more people.
You mentioned the Republican Congressman Peter Meijer, who conceded to the Trump-backed challenger John Gibbs in Michigan. Meijer is one of the 3 House Republicans who ran in yesterday's primaries that voted to impeach the former president. How did the others fare? And ultimately, is their vote to impeach Trump being blamed on, for essentially their defeat?
It is, and that's why the former president engaged in those races, found challenges for them. The Washington State Republicans are likely to hold on, given, again, that open primary system where you've got Democrats and Republicans on the same ballot, so you've got a broader mix of voters. And if that happens, it's very likely that they will get reelected. But that's just, that's the difference between a state that holds open primaries and a state that holds closed primaries, like in Michigan, and why John Gibbs was able to win. But here's the issue, and this is the issue not only in these congressional races, but in these statewide races across the country. Okay, you're somebody who rejects the results of the 2020 elections. You're supported by the former president. among Republican primary voters, you do very well. But in November, it's open to everybody. Right. And our CBS News Battleground Tracker poll out this week points out that in broader contests, where Democrats and independents also have a say, those kinds of candidates don't do as well. And there are a lot of Republicans across the country who know that and think, gosh, okay, these guys won their primaries, but it may mean bad news for us in those general elections in the fall.
And that's what's fascinating. Last question, where you are in Arizona, you've got the Democrat who won, who now, I mean, how well positioned is she based on what the analysts and experts are looking at with the polling to go up against either, you know, Kari Lake or her challenger? I mean, does this almost guarantee that Arizona is going to have another Democrat governor since Janet Napolitano?
No, it doesn't. It does not guarantee that. And that's what's so interesting about Arizona specifically, because again, as you point out, it's been since 2006 that the state has had a Democratic governor. The state still elects Republicans statewide. Katie Hobbs is the Democratic nominee for governor now. She's the Secretary of State right now, so she's been facing the music in terms of all that 2020 stuff since that election 2 years ago. Is she the strongest candidate to take on someone like Kari Lake, a former TV news anchor who knows how to, you know, what's the expression I'm thinking of? Well, she's good at talking. Let's put it that way.
That's right.
And it seems to have worked in this election. Her opponent, Karen Robson, equally impressive and smooth. And, you know, if this is a race where fundamentals remain bad for Democrats and they can't turn out the right number of people, someone like Kari Lake or Karen Robson, who also can't say explicitly whether Joe Biden won the White House, could win. What does that say about Arizona? What does that say about truth and the results of the 2020 and the afterglow we're still living through? Well, we'll wait and see. But this is the one big battleground where election deniers may have their best shot. And that's what's so troubling to a lot of Republicans, not only in this state and across the country, but of course Democrats and independent observers who worry about the validity of our election.
We always talk about voter turnout, Ed, but what we saw last night in Kansas with voter turnout and people who signed up to vote and voted to basically maintain the right to an abortion could be interesting as a harbinger of what we could see elsewhere. Mr. O'Keefe, thank you.
Absolutely.
Good to see you, bud.
Take care.